Welcome to this edition of Drone News 2021 from Jeff Sibelius and LandandAirPhotos.com. Up to now, people who wanted to enter the FPV drone arena generally had to buy the various components and build the system out themselves. DJI just announced their new FPV drone, which bridges the gap between video drones like the Mavic series and the FPV market. For those who aren't familiar with the term FPV, it means first-person view. FPV drone flyers fly by viewing the camera's feed rather than watching the drone itself. FPV flying is different than camera drone flying in several ways. With a camera drone, it's all about the photography. With an FPV drone, it's all about the exhilaration of the flight. FPV pilots are flying by the drone's view, usually wearing goggles, so they typically fly forward and maneuver the drone around through its path. For this reason, any obstacle avoidance, particularly for sideways, backwards, or up and down flight, is not part of an FPV system. Camera drone operators often fly sideways and backwards. Obstacle avoidance is more important because the drone often flies in directions other than what is shown through the camera's view. Where camera drones usually fly higher in the sky, FPV flight is often done at very low altitudes, almost ground level, dodging around in between obstacles. A camera drone is a tool for photography and normally doesn't require high speeds unless it's done with fast-moving subjects. FPV is for racers. It's amazing how FPV pilots can fly their drones through obstacles and around a complicated path at such high speeds. FPV drones can flip and do barrel rolls. A camera drone can't do these maneuvers. FPV flights normally don't use GPS for sustaining the drone's position. That means the pilot must control the drone manually, even when simply trying to hover. The controller sticks for an FPV drone normally don't snap back to center position when you release them. FPV drones typically have a shorter range. An FPV video will bank as the drone banks to enhance the feeling that you're actually flying. Camera drones often have an FPV mode which they use to imitate this effect, but by default, the camera drone's gimbal will keep the camera level as you fly through turns. Quite often, FPV drones use GoPro or knockoff action cameras for recording. The video feed is analog rather than digital, so the feed is often very glitchy, but there is no lag or latency in the signal. You see the FPV feed as it happens. A camera drone's feed is digital and there's almost always some latency in the signal reaching the controller. That's why there's that old joke with a camera drone is that you'll hear it crash before you see it. It's important to understand these distinctions between camera and FPV drones so you can really appreciate what DJI has created with their new FPV aircraft. Clearly, the DJI FPV drone leans towards FPV rather than camera drone operations. The most obvious indicator of this is that the FPV drone ships with DJI Goggles too. You can plug a smartphone into the controller, but it has no bracket to hold the phone. The DJI FPV drone is also much faster than other DJI drones, flying as fast as 87 miles per hour in full manual mode. It's quick too, accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 2 seconds. This is actually not high speed in the FPV world, but for people used to flying camera drones, yeah, it's remarkably fast. The DJI FPV drone is also capable of doing loops and flips, something a camera drone can't do. So, at its heart, the new DJI drone is definitely focused on FPV flying. But DJI has incorporated a variety of features that make it a crossover drone between FPV and camera. Anyone who has flown FPV knows the glitchy video sync you typically experience with these types of drones. The DJI FPV has the remarkable OcuSync 3.0, which provides high-resolution, stable, reliable video signal out to 6 miles. You FPV guys can thank the camera drone people for that enhancement. Latency is 28 milliseconds to 40 milliseconds depending on your settings. Frankly, that would scare me a little. 28 milliseconds is not bad, but when you're buzzing along at 87 miles per hour, well, any lag could be devastating. Next, the camera features remarkable capabilities for an FPV aircraft. It shoots up to 4K video at 60 frames per second or 1080 video at 120 frames per second with an ultra-wide 150-degree field of view. The system has built-in lens distortion correction, so you can mitigate the barrel distortion you typically get with an ultra-wide lens like this. The new drone also has GPS, and so it supports return to home and low battery return to home. Depending on what mode you're flying in, you can also stop and hover and the drone will hold its position. As you dig into the specs, however, you see where the FPV drone lacks some of the higher capabilities you find in camera drones. The drone has a one-axis gimbal rather than a three-axis gimbal. The system does have rock-steady electronic image stabilization to help offset this, but still, you won't get the smooth footage from this drone that you get from a Mavic or a Phantom. The FPV drone shoots only 8 megapixel still photos. Well, now, that makes sense. An FPV drone is built to move, not shoot still images. But that is well below what you can do with any current camera drone. If the FPV drone is hovering, you'll probably see the front props in your shot as well. Again, this drone is meant to be moving, not hovering. The FPV drone also lacks any of the intelligent flight modes you find on most basic camera drones. The FPV drone has forward and downward obstacle detection, not obstacle avoidance, which means that it will identify obstacles but not stop the drone from hitting them. Oddly enough, the FPV drone does have DJI's Find My Drone feature, where it will play back the last 30 seconds of the drone's flight to help you find it. Otherwise, I'm trying to figure out how it would work with an FPV drone using goggles. So unless you have a phone hooked up, are you going to be stumbling around a field wearing goggles as you try to follow your drone's track? I don't know. These are all specifications where the FPV doesn't match up to something like the Mavic Air 2, but you really can't call them shortcomings. These specifications and design features fit an aircraft meant for FPV operations. Now that doesn't mean the FPV drone can't play well for camera drone users. It features 3 modes. Normal mode includes flight controls like obstacle sensing, forward and down, and GPS connectivity. In this mode, it basically flies like the Mini 2, Mavic Air 2, or other drones. Max speed in normal mode is 31 miles per hour. Sport mode is a hybrid of camera and FPV operation. In sport mode, you really start to get the look of FPV footage with all the banks and spins. Obstacle avoidance is turned off in sports mode, and your max speed is increased to 60 miles per hour. Manual mode means fully manual. No GPS, no obstacle detection. You're fully in charge of the aircraft, flying it up to 87 miles per hour. When flying in manual mode, you must disable the spring on the sticks so it will truly fly as an FPV drone. The FPV drone also has a cruise control feature which allows you to set the speed and focus more on maneuvering and videoing. That's another nice hybrid feature. Flight time is advertised at 20 minutes, which probably means more like 13 minutes. That's short for camera drones, but it's actually pretty good in the FPV world. DJI was very smart with this new drone. Knowing that the vast majority of its buyers will not be experienced with FPV aircraft, they incorporated some very smart features to help you transition to the FPV world. As I mentioned, it has GPS connectivity to help you in normal mode. You can let go of the sticks and hover, for example. They have incorporated a brake and hover button on the controller. No matter what mode you're flying in, once you hit the brake and hover button, the drone will stop immediately and hover in place. You switch back to normal mode and you can take a moment to work your way out of whatever predicament you're in. Finally, they've added the DJI Virtual Fly app, a flight simulator to help you learn how to use sport and manual modes. This looks to be like an excellent simulator. I guarantee if I got one of these drones, I'd spend the first month practicing with the simulator before I even tried to launch for the first time. Now, even with the simulator, you can expect to crash with this drone if you're not used to FPV flying. When you're zipping around at ground level, flying at 60 miles per hour or faster, you're gonna hit something. DJI very wisely built this drone to break. Several of the pieces, the top shell, the props, the legs, even the camera gimbal, can be removed and replaced DIY, and DJI sells all these replacement parts. Even with that, I strongly encourage you to buy DJI Care Refresh with this drone. The basic package is called the FPV Combo. It sells for $1,300, but with that you get the drone, the controller, DJI goggles too, and a battery for the drone and for the goggles. Now the goggles alone cost $570, so you can see that the drone itself is actually less expensive than the Mavic Air 2. Extra batteries for the drone cost $159 each. Ouch. You can also buy an optional $200 DJI motion controller, which is like a stick you can use to operate the drone without the remote controller. Now, I haven't been impressed with these things in the past, having used devices for Unique and Skydio drones. But from what I see in other reviews, DJI's controller device looks pretty cool. All said, the DJI FPV drone is something completely different, a drone that attempts to bridge the gap between two completely different types of drones. So what do I think of it? Well, I think this drone will be terrific for a lot of people who own DJI drones but have never tried FPV flying. It looks really fun to do. I think this is going to be the primary market for this new drone, and I'm betting it will be extremely popular. I don't think this drone will be well accepted with established FPV flyers. They've been building their own flight systems for years now, so in that way they're a lot like the guys who fly RC aircraft. Many of the RC guys really look down their noses at our off-the-shelf drones, and I wouldn't be surprised if the FPV flyer community didn't adopt the same attitude. The DJI FPV is larger and heavier than other FPV drones, so I question how competitive it will be in FPV drone racing. I think the DJI FPV is going to account for a lot of accidents, and this concerns me. When you're flying a Mini 2 for the first time, you'll probably have it well off the ground. Your greatest risk of a collision is a tree or a light pole. The whole excitement of FPV flying is to buzz around obstacles, usually low to the ground and really, really fast. Couple that with my opinion that the largest block of DJI FPV owners will be new FPV pilots who didn't develop the discipline that comes with building and developing their own drones. I think we're going to see a lot of drone crashes on YouTube. I hope no one gets hurt. Now, I'm not down on the drone. I'm just concerned about the potential. That said, I'm not a big fan of talking bad about a product because of what some stupid people might do with it. And as I said, it looks really fun to fly. Am I going to buy the DJI FPV drone? Not now, at least. I'd love to fly it, but it's out of my price range for the moment for the amount of use I'd get from it. I'm a photographer who flies drones, so this would really be more of a toy for me than anything else. How about you? Are you going to buy the DJI FPV? If so, a link to purchase the FPV is in the description below. Use that link to order straight from DJI, and you'll support the channel. When this drone becomes available at Amazon, I'll include a link to purchase it there as well. Remember, with this drone I suggest you get the DJI Care Refresh package as well. I don't recommend it for all drones, but I do for this one. That's it for now. As always, please subscribe so you'll be notified when I publish again. I've got links to a couple videos on screen, so check those out. And your likes and comments are always appreciated. Thanks for watching.